So I wanted to start, we're in the 5th year of the Health Lions. It's been through a number of iterations. I remember coming here one Thursday of what would have been last week, and after 10 days in Cannes, that was a marathon stint. But now it's part of the main show, and it's been concentrated into Monday, Tuesday. So I wanted to start, Ritesh, you've been here several times actually. How do you think it's evolved, and how well do you think it's representing the industry and the best work and the trends?
So I think from an evolution perspective, people say that health is now being recognized as a genuine thing because it's been put into the main show. But in people I talk to, it's actually not that different. You know, it's just we're still health. We keep going. Overall, I was a judge last year, so I went to that painful, brutal 5 days.
You were stuck in a dungeon for yes, yeah.
Exactly. To hear some of the judges this year talk about the work, etc., was really gratifying. I think we finally turned up.
Yeah. We'll talk a bit more about the work in detail. But I mean, do you think it's really, because there were complaints that it felt a little bit of a side show and that it wasn't really taken as seriously, and that people, you know, weren't sticking around for the rest of the show. But you think the changes Cannes has put in place, you think they've been successful?
Yeah, I think so overall. From the conversations, the ad hoc conversations I've had for people who were here last year, my fellow judges from last year, they're all very positive about the change.
Yeah.
So it's good. Yeah.
Ed, this is your first year, I think, actually. So what are your impressions of the event and what you've seen?
Overall, very impressed in terms of the caliber of the work that I've seen for several reasons. One, the work that we've seen that was awarded yesterday, or what we've seen on display, you've seen a lot. They're getting away from the old school of an idea for a campaign, but now about programs and how those programs are really executed through. And so there's a lot more dimensionalization of these programs. The opioid example yesterday, the 22,000 deaths that they showed, and how that building the awareness with the impact, or the calm, the suicides in the UK. And so making very strong statements, dimensionalizing the problem to build that awareness, but then to pull through. I think the other thing that I saw with the programs were incredibly smart and simple. The emoji for blood, you know, in terms of blood types. Yeah. Incredibly smart, incredibly simple, but incredibly effective. And so I saw a lot of those type of ideas. I also saw ideas that actually now going back to storytelling and back to some of the basics. And those storytellings are based on, back, and I was talking to Steve before, when you looked at it back in the 70s, and not that I'm that old, but just what my parents used to tell me, you saw things were really based on the underlying truths. And so now a lot of it is based on the truth, the authenticity, making it real. And so when you look at how things are dimensionalized, you see how smart they are, you see how their storytelling, it makes for some really compelling creative. And I have to say the judges, I think they had a hard job. So
yeah, there was a lot of work actually that didn't even make the winners list from the shortlist, which I thought was really good stuff, and so that speaks to the strength. How about you, Chris? Do you think health has really finally got its place amongst the Cannes Lion experience, and with these changes and with what you've seen over the last 2 days?
Yeah, so this is my second year. I was here last year as well, and you know, last year I felt the same that I feel today, which is it's incredible to not only have health as a separate track. If you really think about it, there's not a retail track, there's not an automotive track, but there is a health track. And I think having it separate is something that is extremely inspirational, because as you think about what health does, we are helping patients with their conditions. And one thing, again, over and over, with all the examples that Ed just talked about, and so many more, from the Blink campaign, which was absolutely amazing. Give a Heart. These are really helping, from organ donation to suicide. They're helping patients with very serious conditions, and it's doing good. So I think that's inspirational. I think it's great. I think it's great to have a separate. The thing that I would slightly say that last year had the edge versus this year was, even though it's part of the main track, I think yesterday was a ghost town. And so I was walking through Palais de, many times yet during the
You're picking up your French there.
Palais de, oui. Je m'appelle.
Who says Americans can't speak foreign languages?
Pas moi. So just like walking around the exhibits, it was quiet, and I felt that there was not the amount of energy. Perhaps take the award dinner, put it the first night as opposed to last night, so it draws people in. I suspect most people came in yesterday, and so it took a little bit out of it. But other than that, to the former, it's a very inspirational, unbelievable.
Yeah, it felt
track.
like a little bit like the Sunday maybe on the previous years. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but there aren't that many more people. I think generally, from last year to this year, I have seen that. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people who were here last year who aren't here this year. So
there's a general
mixture of both, I think. There's a lot
generally
of
fewer
who haven't
people.
come.
Yeah. How about you, Jason? Where do you think health sits now after 5 years in the Lions?
Well, this is my first year being part of the health track. We had I've represented work here for almost a decade. This year it was interesting. We had a big campaign that was awarded 2 golds last night in health, but we were getting a lot of replies from the CAN committee saying, you should enter this in pharma. We think it's better for pharma. So we actually took their advice, brought it into pharma. We had 11 shortlists yesterday for health, 0 for pharma. And I have to say, it seems with the way they awarded, I don't think they know how to differentiate quite perfectly yet. And maybe that's a sign of hey, maybe we need to rearrange things. But you could see with the Blink piece, that was generally loved in health, was not thought to be as incredible in pharma. There were pieces in pharma that were fantastic, but they felt more health to me. And I'm not sure if they were awarded there because it was slim pickings or awarded there because, hey, it's just good work. So I think there's problems in that delineation. I do wonder, and I think you make a great point. It's like there's a health track, there's a pharma track. Where's the automotive track? How much can we sort of sub-categorize? What I do think would be interesting, and maybe this is pure ignorance, but we're seeing the sort of the exponential growth of for good work that companies are doing, whether it's branded or whether it's just nonprofit. I wonder if it's more of a for good track. And you really delineate that way versus trying to make it a category like health and pharma.
That's a really good dovetail, actually. And so let's talk about pharma, because in 3 of the 5 years, Grand Prix hasn't been awarded. This year, for the second year running, there was no Grand Prix. You're talking about the Blink campaign. That actually won the Grand Prix in the good category.
Right.
And I read in the Cannes magazine today that it couldn't be considered for a Grand Prix in pharma because it was done by an NGO, which I didn't actually know. So the jury chair actually said that was a potential for a Grand Prix, but they couldn't pick it, which is a shame, really, because I'd love to hear what you think. Not picking a Grand Prix each year, what's that saying about the creativity in the industry and the work? Is it not almost an indictment, or is it? I can't think of any other categories where they don't hand out Grand Prix on a regular basis.
But to your point, as I said, I was a judge last year, so I was in that pharma jury.
On the pharma,
yeah.
Right. So what's the barriers then?
Here are the 3 things that we gave Louise feedback on. One is no clarity. So there's a lot of ambiguity of what's health, what's pharma. Mm-hmm. So they need to really clarify and put in, this is what pharma means. If you're going to go award that, that's the case, right? Last year's Grand Prix winner, we actually did consider it. And again, it was an NGO. It was the Afghanistan, health ministry that won it. And we wanted to award it for pharma, and it was the same thing. You can't.
So why can't you? Why is that?
But our point was, then it shouldn't have been entered into pharma.
Yeah.
Right? So we were sat there going, we want this to win, and they said you can't because it's an NGO, so it has to win for good. Then we said, then why did you have them even put it in pharma for us to even see? Right. It should have been rejected straight away. So there's a lot of ambiguity still around what's pharma, what's health and wellness, what's good, what's cause, and they haven't clarified that. And so people submit things into multiple things.
So for the agency folks, is it a deterrence now for the last 2 years? No Grand Prix.
Well, that was what I was going to finish with, which is from last year. I remember going back to Ogilvy, and every creative, how could you do this? You've put us 10 years back. I'm like, I'm one of 7. It wasn't me. I voted for it. You know?
I've been on the receiving end in a social campaign we did called Project Drive-In, where they said no Grand Prix, and we were the gold. So you felt like we won and we lost.
So I do agree. I think it doesn't do the industry well, because I do remember going to 3 clients about a week after, and each one of them said the same thing. But the problem we have in pharma, there is amazing work. The clients won't allow you to enter it.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen amazing work by many agencies. I showed a few today in my little speech a half hour ago. The clients don't allow you to do it. That's the other problem.
But one thing Rich Levy, who was chair of jury from FCB, said was that this year there were entries from a lot of the big global pharma companies, which was not happening before. So, yeah, maybe would someone want to pick up on that? You know, are we making progress in that Bayer and Boehringer and all these other companies are putting work in?
Yeah, so what we see with the clients that we're dealing with, there are 2 fundamental questions they have. Is one, what is the value of the award itself? Because they're sitting there, I'd rather help get my business up and running, and so it's not a priority for them. Is it behind, in the back of their minds? Do they really want it? Absolutely. But I think to your point, with respect to today's world, in terms of it's not perceived to be a good thing to be out there boasting that, my product, whatever it may be, that is a cancer drug and people are dying, and we want to go to war for creativity. It just, there's that, conflict.
But it's an internal thing, though. You know,
absolutely. I agree.
I pander to the BI ego. There's 3 guys there who basically make these decisions, and I said, you should come because you'll be celebrated and people will love you if you win a lion. So that's the way to do it.
but that's the thing, is a lot of them don't attend. So if you look here, the pharma clients don't attend.
But it's not just about the award show. So I think one of the things that I saw this year that I didn't see last year was Mark from GSK. Actually opened up the Lions Health yesterday morning. Johnson & Johnson presented today, and a few other life science companies were at Pfizer. So there were actually life science presentations, and I actually love the idea of for good. But the thing that that I would like to balance out as well is when you have life science companies, the Pfizer, the GSKs, and the J&Js, all in one area, talking about creativity and empathy and trust and how to build on it, it does create something very special. So I love the idea. Just have to balance the 2. So the one difference, and I think it's a good thing, which is getting more life science companies to be present here, maybe not for an award show, but actually talk about what they're doing and how they're connecting with patients.
Yeah, but if they see the work, they'll go back and challenge their agencies. You see, so it's that cycle you have to get through. But if they can't, then they won't challenge the agency, so the work will not get pushed.
Yeah,
the brave work won't get pushed.
So I think there are 2 things to your point, Chris, and I agree with what you're saying. But from what we're hearing from the clients are, one, again, it's just not the environment for us to be celebrating. It's not there. To participate, to educate, like Mark did yesterday, open the meeting, great presentation, really well structured, so on and so forth. More than happy to. So there's that participation, but they're selective as to where they're going to participate. And I think the second thing is none of them want to be shown, again, in today's environment with, their picture, even as innocent, because we know how things are taken out of context in today's world. And so a picture just with them with the Lion Award right now, it's not that environment. It's not the context that they're looking for.
Did you talk to Mark? MedLegal took 3 weeks to approve his presentation. Really, dude?
Well, that did.
There you go. Right? Exactly. Yeah.
It was a fascinating presentation, wasn't it? Because he really lifted the lid on how they've restructured, and maybe we can talk about that. We were talking about, is it campaigns anymore, or is it programs? And has digital and data sort of taken us on a step from the old concept of a campaign? So did that GSK structure and the way they've speak to that, and then speak to the way modern messaging and communications is going, and how's that going to change the type of work that's awarded in the future?
Well, I'll start on the restructuring. So Mark talked about, they had certain silos of marketing and procurement and other silos, and basically they took the chief digital officer and they put the chief digital officer at the top of the organization with many different areas of focus underneath. And one of the things that I think that accomplishes is with so much more data that you're getting through digital and so many more ways that you can reach and communicate to a patient, the level of personalization that is able to occur is just different. And I think GSK is recognizing that organizationally, digital is a new means of communications in ways that, name all the buzzwords, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, down the line. But taking that in a health environment, you can really change a person's life. And I think that's where they're putting it to the forefront.
I think the other thing is that I think the organizations themselves, and again, I don't want to harp on it, but sometimes the lexicon is important. So when you say awards, you get a negative reaction. And I think I like your point, Jason, about doing something good, because that is something, the industry that saves lives, cures people, all the good things we do, versus, just general, consumer work of beers and cars and so on and so forth. I mean, it's a very different connotation. Of course, our industry, is in the same category as oil, tobacco, and, financial institutions. And that's a shame that, an industry does so much good to be categorized in such, class of other organizations or categories of businesses. Yeah. And so there's an opportunity there, and I agree with you. So the words awards is something easy to fix, to kind of make it more broad to what today's environment's about.
And a lot of big companies are making that part of their programs. So even though another company I work with, Honda, doesn't necessarily get into the healthcare space, they have plenty they do for the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation and other charities that would make them a candidate for health, and so many other. And again, it's not. I'm saying, forget health for a second. It's taking all those causal campaigns, which now get wrapped up in film and all the other categories, and actually turning them into their own thing, because it's become such a big part of what advertisers do. In fact, I was just reading the other day that Fox is going to change their commercial breaks, or at least try something where they're going to do a spotlight series. The Unbreakables, thank you.
And reviewed it yesterday, the Pfizer guys. They showed some of the snippets.
Yeah. I think. And so it's interesting. I mean, it's they want to attach big brands to them. It is sort of a tie to healthcare, to change, to spotlighting people with disabilities. I don't know. It's hard to make these sandboxes and sort of draw the lines and expect people not to cross them.
It is, because, and also there's been some people who think that Cannes should actually split out all the work for good and put it in a separate box, because there's concerns that it's only those sort of campaigns that win across the board, not just in health. So if we're proposing that we go more down that road for health, is that the right way to go? I don't know.
I would just also say to extend it, right? So good is a good category, but then it has to be extended to do good. So, for example, when I earlier shared about the Himoji example yesterday, or the Ouchie with the wristbands for those with arthritis for the kids, right? Simple, brilliant ideas, or the AI for bedridden patients. Again, wonderful, brilliant ideas that could work anywhere around the world. So when they're good, yes, but then how do you do good? Take them and extend them around the world, and making sure they become part and parcel. I mean, all of us get, for giving blood, and we all get different announcements, or however we all receive them. But wouldn't it be easier if they knew your blood type in your profile and your social media profile? Mm-hmm. How quickly that'd be? Why can't it be done everywhere? And so I think if you get the companies involved in something like that, and then someone sponsors it, so the big multinationals, they could then do it at a global level and bring it into. And that's one of the things that Steve and I were talking about is all the work that we saw. I was really impressed. Good, yay. But they're still at the local level. And we live in a global world, and so how do we take these things and make them global so that others could benefit? The blink to talk, or blink that we saw yesterday. All these things, there's so many great ideas. Mm-hmm. Let's take them and do good with them.
Yeah, but let's not forget, this is a festival for creativity.
Right.
It's not about healthcare or doing good or auto or whatever. It's creativity in general. So my head goes more towards if you're going to stick with this is the festival for creativity, that is a very creative thing. It does good too, but celebrate it, and that should win, right? It's because that's what this should be about. If you want the other creatives to then get excited about doing amazing work, showcase the creativity. It doesn't matter what it is.
But especially in healthcare, though, it does come with that complexity of the sort of why did I do this, and just the sort of you're doing this creative work, but you're being honored for work versus the sort of cause. You're doing it on the backs of sick people or whatever it is.
Gotcha. But I would submit that if it's the creativity piece, then there shouldn't be any other barrier around it to say, well, it has to do this, it has to be good cause or whatever. The problem was these people suffer. There's no awareness of it. Creatively, this is how I fix that problem.
True.
And if that idea and that creative hangs, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah, and I would agree. The only thing, this is why I say about the word awards, and again, in our environment, is that if you do that, and that's why a lot of the pharma companies aren't here or in these type of celebrating it, is you get the situation whereby they want to celebrate it, but they can't. They don't want to be on the front page. We said that, got it. But what then happens is that if they are just here for the sake of being here, it's not, like I said earlier, it's not their priority. And that's just the reality of our situation.
One suggestion I think we're somewhat touching upon in a few different ways. If it was a for good track, that its main section was health because of all the things that good can have.
Right.
But you're adding something, so you have to take one thing out. Life sciences for the awards. And I think we might have solved the problem right there.
I hope the CAN committee's watching.
But look, you go to pitches, right? Every agency has to pitch for work sometimes in their lives. The first 3 opening slides are how big you are, how wonderfully creative you are, and here are all the awards I've won. Right? So there's something off kilter. If the awards aren't important,
We call the awards a healthy byproduct
That's right.
of doing
great
work that,
Right.
that matters.
So whether they're here or not, I don't know if that matters as much as allowing us to submit their work. It doesn't matter to me whether Novartis or Boehringer or AstraZeneca are here in person. But if they allow us to submit the work and the work wins awards for the agencies have done a good job, right? So it doesn't, to me, it's not a factor of...
Yeah. I was going to ask Bernardo this question because he's from FCB. He's not here. You've been on the jury, so I'm going to throw it out to you. There were quite a few winners from FCB, and you've got the chair of jury from FCB. That makes old hacks like me very cynical,
Scandal.
Tinfoil hat comes out now. Yeah.
How do you, as a jury member, as in that process, how can you sort of assure everyone that it's a totally fair process, that they're recusing themselves when they should, and that there's no sort of foul play going on?
So, I can just tell you from my experience, it was my first time on the jury last year. It is a bit like Survivor. You have to find allegiances and people who are like-minded. It literally is a bit like Survivor. You are absolutely asked to leave the room if there is work from your company of any sort. And you leave the room. And you're brought back in afterwards. And they are brutal.
And people don't really know where the campaign's from, the jurors. Nope. It's all blind unless...
Yeah. The only thing you get is the company that's entered it.
Right. The only thing I would add is I have no horse in this race, in the agency race. Optically, I would not have put Rich up on the stage to actually.
It was too late, though.
He's the jury president.
Because it went through my mind. It went through a lot of other people's mind. It's even being asked here. Optically, I wouldn't have put him on stage.
But and that goes back to the transparency bit, right? Back to the rules. If you're more transparent about it and you say, this is pharma and this is how it works and this is how the judging works and all that sort of stuff, you'll take some of the ambiguity out and the tinfoil people won't get too excited, right?
I liken this discussion to what we get, when you have conflicts, potential conflicts. And one of the things is you got to make sure that whether it's firewalls, the processes, the rules, all these things need to be clear, but also that it then goes into trust. because I think cons, obviously the reputation's at stake. So from my perspective, I didn't have that inkling yesterday at all. I believed in the system.
I'm
and I
not
thought-
suggesting that. I'm
No,
just,
no, I'm just saying,
I'm
but-
sorry.
Yeah,
I
but,
wouldn't
but
ever
I'll,
do that.
I'll finish the
but-
reason why I said it's like Survivor, to give you the right example. So as a jury member, you can bring a thing back that was thrown out and lobby for it. So I lobbied for one thing, which I thought was quite good.
And what was it part of your company
But it
that
was
you were
from
lobbying?
Brazil, right? So they said, well, you can't do that. But then Amit, who was sat next to me from Medulla, two fellow Indians, brown people sitting next to each other, we sort of went, hi, can you vote for this?
And
that's
just so
what-
you know, I've heard those stories on other,
That's right.
yeah,
so
on
that
other
can
juries.
happen. We
Yeah.
didn't do it. I didn't do it. And
Vote for my network, I'll vote for yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
so those things
vote for
happen,
my
you know,
country.
It's natural human behavior that occurs when these alliances are formed, and you can. Last year, June was, the head of McCann was the jury chair for us, for Pharma. There were quite a few McCann things that got awarded. And when you sit back and you think about it, there were alliances that were made, and I sort of go, oh, they put that piece of work back in. How did that happen, right? So,
that's a whole other panel,
Exactly.
the machinations of the juries. But
Exactly.
anyway, I thought I'd bring that
Exactly.
one up. Has anyone got any questions for our panelists?
gosh, we're good.
Or are you all desperate to... Do you just want to say where you're from?
Oh, now you're on.
Well, I'm representing Southern Methodist University here. I brought some grad students. I'm the executive in residence at the advertising program there. But I worked for 15 years in pharma and strategy with digital, with IMC Squared, Cadian Group, people like that. I'm curious because I guess I kind of feel the same way you guys do, which is why can't we just award the creativity in the category for what it is? I mean, we have our own barriers to creativity, including reg legal, all of that kind of stuff, plus the whole idea of awarding professional work. That kind of stuff, that the challenges are just as difficult. The work may not be as awe-inducing at the end of the day, but it definitely has the results. So I'm sort of like, can't we just refocus and be like, let's create the criteria based on what the reality of our industry is? Otherwise, everything ends up being all the super touchy-feely.
And also your students will see that great work and maybe want to go and work at GSK or wherever. And talent is one of the biggest issues in the industry as well, isn't it? Anyone else got any questions?
This is just a clarification. With some of the awards, so for instance, with the wristband that showed if your
sip.
if your drink is doped, did the agency actually come up with the wristband or just the campaign to support it?
So I don't
know?
know about that because I was in the jury, but I can tell you what we did last year. So there was one that was submitted, which was very good, and it was from Japan. And we asked that same question. So what was the agency's role in this? Because it was a startup that had come up with a really unique health thing. And so did they create the idea? Did they go find the startup? Did they promote it? What was their role in it? And what we found was they did the press release. And so we said, well, nah, you're out. So they were out. So the juries will go and question some of these things. It depends on the juries, though. But we did. We questioned a lot of the work. There was a lot of, there were 2 or 3. There was Samsung glasses, which basically were created for Alzheimer's patients, where they showed you, you look at somebody.
yeah.
And
Those
it
were
pops up,
amazing.
That's your daughter, that's
Baidu.
your son, that's your friend, to keep you remembering, right? But again, the agency had nothing to do with it except that they created the poster, right? So that was dropped out.
There's that one, and then there's the old thing that something never actually went to market. It was just a sort of pitch
Exactly.
style.
That was the other one as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. So we did. There was one from Northwell where it was the Finn that won, right? But it was the agency. They came up with the idea. They went to Northwell. They worked with the Northwell team. So that got awarded.
We were talking about the Braille last night, and in terms of the device itself, was absolutely
Amazing.
amazing. what did the ad? Was that the agency's part of their product with the advertising, or was it the advertise? So that's where I started to question.
And I'll
it
tell
as
you,
well.
with digital health, it's going to get even more and more blurry.
Yes.
It really is going to get more and more blurry, which is why I say they need to clarify the rules.
But
Create a category. Exactly. Exactly.
or just in terms of who's taking the credit for the work and making sure. And what I saw yesterday is there were a number of, particularly in Brazil and other markets, where there's 3, 4, 5, 6 companies. And I think, and if the objective is to reward creativity, and it's a great idea, great. Who's submitting it? Who's taking credit for it? So if you're an agency one taking credit for the thing, and it's just a press release of something, I mean, to do that, it's wrong.
Yeah, it's a perennial discussion about the crediting, isn't it? And they've possibly gone too far the other way now in terms of
exactly.
crediting everyone. So from reporters' point of view, we're cutting down the amount that you have to be the main idea, otherwise we don't report
Hey,
it.
listen,
Whose idea is it?
I found out I'm shortlisted on 7. Because I looked for my name and I went, oh, I never did that. I don't know about that one. Where did that come from? So my name's on there because I attended one meeting on an ideation session, so they were being nice to me and put my name on it, right? So, you've got to give it to the core team.
Any final questions before we head to the bar?
I have to say I was disappointed GSK didn't call me for that chief digital role. I got to talk to Mark.
It was interesting that he obviously restructured the whole company under the chief digital officer. Surprise, surprise! That was interesting. That was quite interesting that they did open up like that.
Can I ask a question to the fellow
Sure.
panelists?
Sure.
We saw the awards. Do you agree with the final awards, or would you have picked a different Grand Prix winner?
I would have picked a different Grand Prix winner.
That's in the health and wellness category.
Yeah.
We didn't really
I
talk
agree.
about that much, actually. I mean, if anyone wants to add anything on that category and that piece of work, which was very effective and led to a lot more sign-ups for donors. So it worked. The creativity kind of worked. It drove results.
I'll just for you guys, last year, 698 entries. First day, we cut it down to 400. You knew straight away. Some of them were just rubbish. Why did they even bother, kind of thing. We shortlisted to something, and then the battle royale occurred around the metal, right? So it's an arduous process, and by day 3, you sort of figure out which ones are going through and are going to actually do something, and those are the ones they focus on. So it's not infallible, There are human beings involved here with, all sort of the cognitive biases that we have.
What was your latest finish, judging?
1 in the morning.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, day 3.
I would love those numbers this year and what the comparison
Yeah,
was.
it would be really
year over
interesting.
year.
Well, Renata, who works with me at Ogilvy, was on the pharma one, so I'll ask her. I'll get it to you.
Okay, let's just finish with one maybe message to the Cannes organisers for next year. One thing you'd like to see them bring in to improve the whole experience, the awards process, the content.
I can become chair of the... No, sorry. I really do think...
The GSK guy's got it already.
That's right, yeah, he's the digital guy. I would suggest, I really do think further clarity is required around who can submit and what's the work, and how do you really clarify that this is pharma versus health and wellness. We'll keep going this way otherwise.
By the way, why don't they have clients on the juries? Why is it all
Good
agents?
question, I have no idea.
Great question.
Well, you know why? Because the agencies are creative and the clients aren't. No, only kidding. You can quote me.
Well, that's not off the record. All right, Ed.
They can't cut this out.
I'd actually like to see. I'd actually like to see a category for global work and the pull through, because again, a lot of great work and very much at the country level, but we live in a global world and it's a strong trend in the industry. So I'd like to see that category be.
That's
put
interesting.
forth.
That is interesting because Cannes is perceived as completely global because it has campaigns from every country around the world. But truly global work is you're correct there, Chris.
Transparency as well, but I think more in the selection process, like what they were looking at when they made their decisions? Like, what is there a grid that we can? And again, there's going to be intangibles like that moved me, an emotional response. Put that in a bucket, but then also understand. To Andrew, to your question before, like, is this a product, or is this truly because they used media in a certain way, they used creative in a certain way, they used high visual in a very specific way. Like, have those brought out transparently so we know what we're celebrating.
Jason?
Sorry, just to build on your point, because actually for you guys, the awards that are coming up. So I just asked if the judges, when you do the actual judging, how is it done? I said, I imagine there's a scoring. And he said, no, it's not No, but I mean in terms of quantitative, make it quantitative, because when you have so many and you have to do it qualitatively to assess, then you get into too much subjectivity. But at least if you then kind of quantify it, and it'd be a lot easier to cull it down and then have more objective discussions.
We can all quantify what's great and what's not, and what's sad and what's not sad. But I do think, and you did get me thinking about this in terms of the way things are voted on, and being part of an independent agency. I feel like we're always coming in at a disadvantage, given the big networks and given the sort of the way countries vote together. I would love to see sort of data.
Allegedly.
I've heard firsthand, but I would love to see data on not just why they voted for things, but which countries voted for which work, which was made by which countries, which networks voted for which work, which was based on which ones did they actually save, and where did that come from. I would love to see that stuff measured so that we can have some transparency as people who enter, tens of thousands of dollars worth of work into this, that we feel like we're getting our money's worth.
Well, that's up to us, the journalists, as well, to ask those questions too. So we will do. So listen, thank you, guys. That was really interesting, Ritesh. Great to have you along at short notice. Thanks for doing that. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to PulsePoint for supporting it.
Thank you.
Round of applause for the speakers and the panelists.
Thank you.